that it appears now you vetoed this idea for the change in the childcare plans. Can you tell my listeners all about this?
Yeah, so this was a proposal to basically change the number of toddlers that people in nurseries can look after. So at the moment, you can look after, under the law, that is 4 toddlers for every person in a nursery, and then the suggestion was that should go up to 6.
And 4 babies under the age of 1 instead of 3. So
all that kind of stuff, exactly. And
initially you agreed to this?
No. What we said was that we would consult people on this idea, and then we would react to how people responded.
So you never indicated to your coalition partners at any time that you agreed with this?
What I said was, what we all said as a government was, this is a proposal. It's a controversial proposal. Let's see what people think. What I said, by the way, very, very explicitly within government was, we can only decide on this when we've heard the responses of people who, frankly, know better than any politician about what it's like to look after 4, 5, 6, 2-year-old toddlers in nurseries. Anyway, that then went several months, and basically the response, not just, by the way, from kind of nurseries and people who work, sort of professionals in the sector, but overwhelmingly also from parent groups, where they thought this was a bad idea. They thought it was a bad idea for a number of reasons, but the one that I focused on, having really looked at the responses to the consultation, was the claim initially made that it would somehow reduce the kind of weekly childcare bill for families, which I, like everybody, I desperately want to do whatever I can to bring childcare costs down. In fact, we're doing a whole lot. We're going to be delivering tax-free childcare from 2015 onwards. And what came back was really a very clear answer. There was no real evidence that this would reduce childcare costs. In fact, one nursery after the other that I visited said, to be honest, Mr. Clegg, they would say to me sort of privately, this might well drive costs up because we're going to have to spend more money on more high qualified. So listen, I don't know about you. I know everyone gets terribly sort of hot under the collar in the Westminster Village. I have a very straightforward view. If you have an idea which is controversial, you ask people what they think. When you've asked them what they think, listen to what they say, listen to what parents say,
yes.
Look at the evidence, and then make up your mind. And that's exactly what we've done.
Saying you did once agree. In fact, one of them is quoted, a source as saying you couldn't run a business like this of your decisions.
I'm sorry, it's just flatly wrong. What we agreed at the time was that we would consult on these proposals and not make our minds up final until we'd heard from people. Let me just ask a very straightforward question.
Sure.
What on earth is the point of consulting people if you're not prepared to listen?
Well, as long as you
them?
haven't said in advance you're going to do it, I totally agree with you, but you hadn't done it. Okay.
Clearly you don't finally decide on something if you're consulting on it until you've heard what people have said in response.